Welcome to episode 4, part 2 of Learn the Card. During this episode, you will participate in interactive exercises so you can learn how to build the hands using your timeless American Mah Jongg card. We're going to go ahead and start with the left panel, upper left section of the card, the 2039 year hand section. So go ahead and pause the video so that you can locate this section of the card. We're going to be going over line 1, so go ahead and pause the video so that you could locate line 1, which is stated right here under the line on the screen. Now remember, all of the hands under this section are going to utilize the timeless year 2039. So let's start looking at the hand from the left side, and we have 4 flowers, or a Kong of flowers, as 4 of like tiles would be called. We then have a pung of reds and a grouping of single tiles 2039 and a pung of soaps. On the card, in parentheses, it says opposite dragons. So let's break this down. If, as shown in the picture, you use BAMs for the single grouping 2039, then the opposite dragons would be the pung of reds and the pung of soaps. However, those BAMs in the single grouping 2039 can also be cracks or dots. And if you do use cracks for the 2039, then the dragons would have to be greens and soaps. And if you use dots for the 2039, the dragons would have to be reds and greens. As a reminder, 2039 is a grouping of single tiles, which means you cannot use jokers there. And we also have our Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde tile, the soap tile, which is being used as a 0 in this single grouping. Now let's move on to line number 3. Go ahead and pause the video so you can find line number 3 in the 2039 section. In this hand, we have a pung of 2s, a pung of 0s, a pung of 3s and 9s, and a pair of dragons. And in parentheses, it says any 3 suits. So let's go ahead and break this one down. Starting out with the pung of 2s, I've chosen to use 2 cracks here. And then the next grouping is a pung of 0s. And what do we use for 0s? That's right, we use the soaps as a 0. That's our Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde tile. Now, since it says 3 suits and the 0s do not represent any suit at all in this case, it is merely a number, we have to use a second suit. And I've chosen to use dots for the next pung. So now we have a pung of cracks, 2 pungs of dots, 3 and 9, and it says any 3 suits, which means that we have to find the third suit that is missing, and that would be the BAMs. Now, remember, the dragons match the suits. They're not actually a suit, but they do take on the persona of the suit if the hand calls for 3 suits and is using dragons. So in this particular hand, the third suit missing is the BAMs, and since a pair of dragons is needed, the green is the match to the BAM, and that is what would be used to represent the third suit. Now, if we switch things up and we use BAMs for the pung of 2s and dots for the pung of 3s and 9s, then we would need to use reds for the pair of dragons. Lastly, please notice that I did use a joker in the pung of 3s. And the reason is because you can. You can use a joker in any grouping of 3 or more like tiles. But remember, never for a single grouping or in a pair. Now we're going to move on to the 2, 4, 6, 8 section on the card and line number 2B, B meaning the right side of the line. And if I mention A, that'll mean the left side of the line. So go ahead and pause the video to find the 2, 4, 6, 8 section and line 2B. Now this hand shows in parentheses any 2 suits. And we start out with a pung of 2s, a pung of 4s in one suit, then a kong of 6s and a kong of 8s in the second suit. This is a pretty straightforward hand, and this is our pung pung kong kong configuration, which is on every year of the card and in several sections. It doesn't always show up as a pung pung kong kong, but it does always show up with 2 pungs and 2 kongs in, like I said, several sections. This hand is one of the easier hands to make because you don't have any singles or pairs, and you can use jokers in any of the groupings. So if you will notice here, I started out with a pung of 2 dots, and there is a pung of jokers. Well, in this particular hand, when I was playing against my opponents, somebody else had exposed 4 dots, and I knew I had a competitor and that this hand was going to be a bit more challenging for me to make. But it just so happened that I got lucky with a lot of jokers this hand, and I was able to use 3 jokers to represent my 4 dots. So here you have the dots and the cracks as the 2 suits in this hand. Pretty straightforward and easier to make than a lot of hands. So keep your eye out for the hands that have 2 pungs and 2 kongs. They're always good go-to hands if you need to choose a safer one. Now the second line, which is line 4A, this one states in parentheses any 3 suits. So we start this hand with a kong of flowers, and then we have another kong of 4s in one suit, a kong of 6s in another suit, and we have our single tiles 2 and 4 in the third suit. This hand is the multiplication hand. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, the multiplication and equal symbols are visual symbols only and nothing more than that. The one thing to remember about this hand, most importantly, is that the total of the 4 times 6, 2, 4, are single tiles. They are not a pair, as you might think, because there are 2 tiles, because a pair would be 2 identically matching tiles. These are clearly single tiles, and therefore you would not be able to use jokers in this grouping. Now for these suits, you could use any 3 suits, so you could change up the BAMs if you want to dots and then use the cracks, which would mean that you would have to use the 2-4 in BAMs. And likewise, you could use the dots, BAMs, and cracks. Okay, staying on the left side of the card, let's move on down to our final section of like numbers. We're going to look at line number 1, and in parentheses it says any 3 suits. Now, what's most important to know about this hand is that you can use any number from 1 to 9. However, whatever number you choose must be the same in each of the 3 groupings. And this hand contains a Kong of flowers, a Kong of the number you choose, followed by a pair of that same number, and another Kong of that same number. Okay, now we're going to move on to the middle panel of the Timeless American Mah Jongg card and the top section titled Quints. We're going to be looking at line number 2, so go ahead and pause your video to find this line. And this line number 2 says in parentheses, any number with matching dragons. So this hand can be played with any Kong of numbers between 1 and 9. Whatever number you choose, in whatever suit you choose, you must use the matching dragons for the Quint of dragons. For example, if you use an 8 BAM for the Kong of numbers, you will need to use greens for the Quint of dragons. And if you choose a 6 dot for the Kong of numbers, you will need to use soaps for the Quint of dragons. This hand does provide quite a bit of flexibility where you can use any number you choose, and you also might not need as many jokers as you would in some Quint hands, because flowers can be made without any jokers since there are 8 of them. Now we're going to move down to the consecutive run section, which is still on the middle panel, and I want you to go ahead and locate this section. And I just want to mention that this consecutive run section is the most flexible section on the entire card. The reason is that with exception of line 1A and line B, the runs can start with any number, of course, as long as you don't go over number 9, because there are only 9 numbers, 1 through 9 in each suit. That makes this hand extremely flexible, especially where the hands allow more than 1 suit. So we're going to go ahead and start out by looking at line 1B, and in parentheses you will notice it says these numbers only. So both line 1A and 1B are these numbers only, but we're going to take a look at 1B, and this line shows 1 color only and the numbers 5 through 9. That means you can use any one of the 3 suits, BAMs, cracks, or dots, as long as you use only 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And of course, as a reminder, you cannot use joker in the pairs. The next line we're going to take a look at is line number 5 under the same consecutive run section. This hand is showing 3 consecutive numbers in a row, and in parentheses it states any 3 suits middle pair matches the Kongs. So let's break this one down. I've started with a Kong of 4 dots, and since it shows the same color for the ending Kong, I have used the Kong of 6 dots. And then the middle number, which has to be in consecutive order, has to be a 5, 4, 5, 6, but it is showing 3 pairs, and it does state that the middle pair must match the Kongs. This means that whatever suit you use for the starting number in this run and the ending number in this run must match that middle pair. The other 2 pairs need to be in the opposite suits. The middle pairs need to be in the other 2 suits because you clearly see there are 3 colors on this line, and that means 3 suits. And it gives you the clue in parentheses, again, to remind you. Of course, you already know that you cannot use jokers in any one of those 3 pairs. Next up is the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 section on the middle panel, and the last section on that panel at the bottom. So go ahead and locate that section and locate line number 3A, which would be on the left side of that line. And please note that in parentheses it says any 3 suits. And here you see there are 3 colors, and this is going to be one of those examples of having to use the opposite dragon of the suit you use for the first part and the last part of that hand. So let's go ahead and break this hand down. Here I'm using the pair of 1 bams and the pung of 3 bams, and then I am using a pung of 3 cracks and a pair of 5 cracks. So we need to figure out which dragon represents the 3rd suit. Since greens match the bams and reds match the cracks, which of the dragons is left? And that would be the soaps. So the soaps represent the dots, and that would be the 3rd suit here that they are referring to in parentheses when they say any 3 suits. Now, if we change up the pair of 1s and pungs to begin with and start those with dots, and then the last pung and pair are cracks, then the dragons in the middle for the middle Kong would need to be greens, because the dots and the soaps would match, and the cracks and the reds would match, and the one that is missing would then be the greens. Now, if you were to start this with dots, and the second part for the 3 and 5 would be the bams, then we would need to use the reds for the 3rd suit and the conga dragons in the middle. Learning the dragon to suit matches is not the easiest of things in the American Mah Jongg game, but I do recommend that you memorize these matches so that if somebody were to say to you, what's the match to the bams, you could quickly say greens. What's the match to the reds? You could quickly say cracks. And what dragon goes with the dots? And you could say soaps. This will make things a lot easier when playing the game. And there are so many hands with dragons, you don't want to limit your options. So do yourself a great favor and take the time to memorize these matches. Let's take a look at the next hand listed here under 13579. This would be hand 4B, so that's on the right side of the line. And this hand shows, in parentheses, any 3 suits. So this is pretty straightforward. You've got to use each of the 3 suits. The suits can be played in any order as long as you use all 3 suits. It doesn't matter. And then we have our single tiles at the end of this hand, north, east, west, and south. And of course, those are not a suit. Those are wind tiles. And as a reminder, you cannot use jokers in that single grouping. Now we're going to move on to the right side of the Timeless American Mah Jongg card. And here I am using the line number 2 on the left side as an example. So that would be 2A. And we start this hand off with 2 flowers, and then we have a Kong of dragons, a grouping of 4 single tiles, and another Kong of dragons. I am using the reds and the greens here, and on this line there is no parentheses, which does sometimes happen because there's not enough room. However, because this shows 2 colors, that is your clue to the fact that you can use any 2 dragons for these Kongs. So you can use the reds and greens as I have, you can use reds and soaps, or you can use greens and soaps. It doesn't matter as long as you have a different grouping for the first Kong of dragons and the second Kong of dragons. Now we're going to move down to line number 5 under the same section of Winds and Dragons. And with this hand, we have a pair of norths and a pair of souths on each end of this line. And in the middle, we have odd like numbers. And that's what it states in parentheses. So that means whatever number you choose to use, it must be either 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9, and the number must be the same in each of the groupings. So whatever you choose, as I have shown you here, if you choose the 7, then the 7 must be in each one of those groupings. And also, this hand shows 3 colors, so you must use all 3 suits. Again, I wanted to create this particular card to show you that there are times that in parentheses there are things missing. They do try and put as much as they can on there as a reminder, but if you see 3 suits, you need to know that you must use all 3 suits. Now we're going to move to the 369 section, It's the middle section of that right side panel, and we're going to take a look at line 1B on the right side. And for this hand, in parentheses, it says any one or three suits. This hand begins with a pair of flowers, and then we have 3 kongs, 1 in 3s, 1 in 6s, and 1 in 9s. And this hand is showing the 3 suit option. So 3 cracks, 6 bams, and 9 dots are what I used, but you can use any of the 3 suits to start with, and then the other 2 kongs can be the other 2 suits. So you could use bams for the 3s, you could use cracks for the 6s, and dots for the 9s, or you could use dots for the 3s, cracks for the 6s, and bams for the 9s. It doesn't matter which way you make this hand. So you've got some good flexibility here with this 3 suit option in the 3, 6, 9 section. The next hand also starts with a pair of flowers, but then it is followed by a pair of 3s, a pair of 6s, and a pair of 9s, followed by a pung of dragons and another pung of dragons. Now, this hand also shows, in parentheses, any 3 suits. So we have another situation here where the dragons represent the suit. And in this hand, I have started with bams. Therefore, I had to use the reds representing the cracks and the soaps representing the dots to make sure that I had my 3 suits. Now, this hand can be played with the pairs being cracks, and then the other dragons would be greens and soaps, or the pairs can be played with dots, and then the dragons would be bams and reds. Last up is the singles and pairs section, bottom section of the right panel. Let's go ahead and take a look at line number 5, which is considered the big hand. It has the highest value to the right of it, showing 75 cents or 75 points if you're not playing for money. And as with any of the hands under this section, they all must be made without jokers, because after all, they are all singles and pairs. And what can't you use in a singles and pairs hand? That's right, jokers. So of course, all of these hands are a bit more difficult than any of the others. Taking a look at the bottom hand, in parentheses, it does say any 3 suits, but it's actually all 3 suits must be used here, and that is indicated by the 3 colors. So this hand each year uses the current year of the card, and because this is the timeless card that we are learning on, I have used the 2039 timeless year, and you can see here that 2039 is repeated in each of the suits, and it does start with a pair of flowers. It's fun to make these big hands. It's quite exciting, but they're usually quite difficult to get and quite an accomplishment when you do. Bams. Now I also want to make mention that this section on the card is pretty cool because, yes, the section is challenging to make, but each one of the hands under the singles and pairs are baby bits of the bigger sections. And further on in the lesson, you're going to see why that's important to know, especially if you want to try and go for a singles and pairs hand and need to switch out into something else. Again, you will learn much more about this in future lessons, but just keep in mind that the singles and pairs are merely baby bits of the bigger hands and the others. And I can just give you one example here. If you take a look at line number 2 under singles and pairs, you have all odd numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and that's baby bits of the category 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 in the middle panel of the card, third section down. On a final note about the singles and pairs section of the card, if you have not been dealt in any jokers and you aren't picking any jokers, there is no reason not to try one of the singles and pairs hands. And because they are baby bits of the bigger hands, it makes it a lot easier to switch out into one of the other sections if you end up getting jokers during the game and want to switch out. The next part of the episode is going to be a lot of fun and interactive, so get ready to put your thinking cap on. Go ahead and take your time to work the following screens on your own, and good luck. I'm sure you'll do great. how did you do with all of these exercises? I know it's not easy, and guess what? You can watch this video over as many times as you want, and you could do those exercises over as many times as you want. No pressure, no rush to do so. Things will start coming into place for you. This is a challenging game. I will not deny that. And I want to encourage you to stick with it and to believe in yourself and believe in the ability to learn this absolutely fantastic and wonderful game. And that wraps it up for episode 4. Next up, episode 5, where you will learn basic game rules. And please, if you haven't done so already, once you finish this video, be sure and subscribe for the MahjCon YouTube channel, and consider joining the MahjCon Facebook group and Instagram page so that we stay connected in all ways. I will be having videos posted regularly after the beginner series. I will be working on an advanced beginner series, and you'll get notices as long as you're subscribed to the channel when those videos are ready and posted. Any questions or comments, please email me at debbie@mahjcon.com.